guess we're just gonna be a little, oh goodness, a little bright. Sorry about that. Okay. It was a little too dark without it. Anyways, hello. Today we are going to be reading There Can Only Be Six. I cannot write with that hand. T-H-E-R-E-C-A-N-O-L-Y. By Andrea Levesque. And this is chapter 2 that we are about to read. On the last video, we finished off at chapter 2. So, oh, here it is. Okay, are we ready? I am so sorry about how bright I am. I will look into that next time, before next time. Alright, if you need to be caught up, we read the first chapter of this book on the first 2 videos on my YouTube channel. They are called the same thing, but it is part 1 and part 2. I'm so sorry, I can't look at the camera. Anyway, ready? Chapter 2, Why Am I Wearing This? I whispered to Nina. That's not the name of the chapter, that's just how it starts. Chapter 2, Why Am I Wearing This? I whispered to Nina, who was sipping tea from a hand-painted teacup. She placed the delicate china onto its saucer and let it hover above the table as she leaned in. Because, Harper, flannel isn't a socially acceptable choice of wardrobe for the Newport Country Club, she replied in a practiced whisper. I honestly don't think my dad cares what I wear, I said, glancing across the table at my father, whose brown hair was left uncombed but still managed to look charming as it fell down his 40-something-year-old face. His crisp white shirt was unbuttoned at the top. I smiled as he winked at me across the table. Don't worry, you still look like a lesbian, Nina whispered nonchalantly. Nina, I hissed, attempting to kick her shin but getting tangled in a lace tablecloth instead. This is the hard part about reading live, is that I do stumble over my words, so please bear with me. And I need a little water. I forgot to drink some before I started. Anyway, I'll start with the last sentence on the previous page. Nina, I hissed, attempting to kick her shin but getting tangled in the lace tablecloth instead. She shrugged. What? Your dad knows? I didn't know was a secret. She looked over her shoulder and smiled politely at the old lady with the stark white hair sitting behind her. I shot her a look, then slouched down in my chair a little, as if the table could sufficiently hide me from prying eyes. It's not, but I don't want my official introduction to this town to be the lesbian. It's not the same here as it is in New York. A crumb fell out of Nina's mouth as she took a small bite of her croissant. She caught it with her napkin, then gently dabbed the sides of her mouth. True, you already have the whole girl who got kicked out of school branding. She lowered her voice so my dad couldn't hear. Just one more reason why you should join the Order of the Six status, she winked. I tugged at the fitted cream cardigan Nina his own teacup filled with coffee. "So, Harper, I heard you met the Vasquez twins yesterday," my dad said with a smile, his full attention on me. I heard Nina choke on her tea as a little bit spilled over the rim of the cup. Oops, I guess I forgot to mention that to Nina. "Yeah, I did. By the way, I could have just taken an Uber. You didn't have to ask the kid next door to give me a ride. It was kind of awkward." I grabbed a scone from the 3-tier cake plate and placed it in front of me. "And it was especially weird that he took your car instead of his. He obviously has enough to choose from." "His idea," my dad said. "He wanted you to be as comfortable as possible." I nodded awkwardly. "It wouldn't kill you to make an effort here, Harper. I don't know if you realize it, but this is your last chance." My eyes shot up at him, a scone frozen in my hand. "What do you mean?" My eyebrows furrowed impatiently. He sighed. "Your mother did try and get you into other schools in New York, Harper. They wouldn't accept you." My mouth dropped and I sat up a little. "Are you serious?" "So whoever brought me out here, assuming that theory is correct, went to great lengths." The thought was chilling and I pulled my cardigan closer to me. He nodded, dropping his eyes from mine. "I don't know why. I know the expulsion didn't look good, but usually it's nothing money can't solve." I opened my mouth to protest, but he cut me off. "Look, I know what you're going to say. Your mother and I didn't bring money into it until after we were told no. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Wellesley Prep took you due to my and your notoriety in this town." I kept my eyes focused on the tablecloth. "Lucky me." "Yes," he said, "lucky you. If you're going to recover from the incident at your last school, this is where you want to be, but you must try, Harper." He looked up at the ceiling as if it would give him answers, and the kids here are great. As I said, Don is a sweet kid, and I'm sure his sister is too if you give her a chance. I ripped off a piece of my scone and let it fall back onto my plate. I didn't like sweets this early in the day. I didn't realize you were so close with the neighbors' kids. My dad took a sip of his coffee, then shifted in his seat. His usual air of confidence was wavering, and it was an uncommon look on him. The hum of mindless chatter died around me as I narrowed my focus on my dad. Excuse me. Waiting for the words he was undoubtedly going to say. "I just want to help you make some friends, kiddo. You barely know anyone here." He winked at Nina, and she waved a hand at him flirtatiously, like he'd just complimented her somehow. I rolled my eyes, and he added, and my chest tightened. There it was. "And you have to leave for work already." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I'm only going to be gone for a week. I'll be back before you even start school." "Dad," I shouted in a hushed whisper, "you're going to miss all the holiday stuff. What am I supposed to do? Move in with the Mullers?" At the mention of Nina's family, she bounced up and down in her seat, making a little ee sound. Dad sighed and leaned back, matching my posture. "No, honey, I'll be back before Christmas Eve, and we can get a tree and do Christmas and New Year's and all of it. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Yeah, right, I thought. This was just like all the summers I'd spent out here, hoping secretly that my dad had finally decided to take some time off to spend with me, but somehow, even with summer vacation landing around the same time every year, my dad's fancy engineering job had him flying out to God knows where to do God knows what. The last time I remembered either of my parents truly wanting to spend time with me without some obligation or ulterior was still alive. He was the glue that held us all together, and without him, we stayed apart. My eyes went to the tiny silver spoon resting unused on my tea saucer. I picked up the shiny item and smoothed my fingers over it. Excuse me. The unfamiliar ridges and dips satisfying my need for distraction. What would Mom think about all of this? I said with an edge, not looking at my dad. His jaw clenched. Your mother isn't here, so it's not really up to her how I conduct my business. And if I tell Mom that the minute I got here you decided to up and leave me alone, I threatened, my voice light. He sighed. Harper, the life you had with your mother requires money. To get that money, I have to work. If you want me to continue supporting your mother, you'll need to let me. What? I hissed, leaning up against the table, the fine china shaking at my forcefulness. A couple of people at the table next to us glanced over. Are you saying you'll stop paying Mom's child support if I tattle on you? I gasped. I'm not sure. I assume it's gaped. Guilt spread across my father's features. No, of course not. But what I pay your mother is well above and beyond child support. I also buy you absolutely everything you want or need. My dad leaned over the table and grabbed my hand. I let him take it. All that I'm saying is, if I want to continue going that extra mile for your mother financially, as well as supporting you here, I have to keep up with my business. You know that. I care about your mother, and I want to give you both the best. The look on his face made me soften. I squeezed his hand. I know, I said, looking back down at my spoon. I won't mention anything. I won't mention anything to Mom about it. Nina cleared her throat. Incoming. She sing-songed to both of us. A broad smile beamed across my dad's face. I turned to see a woman my dad's age in a cream wrap dress and matching ascot sauntering towards us with Adon and Valentina in tow. My stomach did a little flip. Macy, Dad said fondly, setting the napkin from his lap on the table as he stood to greet her. I hesitated, but when I saw Nina shift to stand, I joined her, slipping the silver spoon into my jean pocket. Miss Vasquez, Nina nodded politely. Jake, Nina, Macy nodded at them respectively. And you must be Harper. Lovely to meet you, darling, she said, grabbing my hands and pulling them out to the sides to look at me. I let my eyes scan her as well, taking in how similar she looked to Valentina with her long angled face and button nose. The biggest difference between the two of them was her blonde hair, which was like Adon's in color, except for the fact that it was almost certainly a bottle blonde. You are stunning, Harper. My God, how the years have gone by. I haven't seen you since you were a little girl, and you know Adon and Valentina, so I've heard. She dropped my hands and gestured to the twins standing by her. Adon was giving me the same wide grin I was starting to get used to seeing from him while Valentina studied her nails, looking bored. I'm just going to leave the cap off of my water bottle because I'm going to need it quite a few times. Reading in a whisper dries my mouth and throat out so fast. suggested we do brunch at the club. I assumed it was so we could eat, not to entertain some sort of formal social hour. Well, she smiled. I've certainly heard a lot about you. How are you settling in Newport? I've heard a lot about you. From who? I noticed Valentina's eyes snap up at me behind Macy, then dart between her mom and my dad. I sniffed. Oh gosh, I said, formulating an appropriate response. Being by the beach 24/7, how could I complain? Macy laughed and patted me on the shoulder. Jake, dear, you'll give me a call later, she asked, and he nodded. Of course. Talk to you in a bit. With that, Macy headed to an empty table in another section of the room. Thank God rich people valued space. I was about to dare my dad a new one, and I didn't want the Vasquezes to hear a word of it. So, my dad said, I thought you may want to change your room up a bit now that it's more than just a vacation home for you. Any thoughts on redecorating? I have an excellent interior decorator that could get it all done before I'm back from my trip. You're dating Mrs. Vasquez, I hissed. It's Miss Vasquez. Her husband passed away years ago, and, well, you don't miss anything, do you, Harper? My little detective, always seeing things other people don't. Your grandfather would be so proud. Dad. My dad cleared his throat and met my eyes. That was the other thing I was meaning to tell you. I clenched my jaw, and she's totally fine with you traveling so much for work. Like, does she even get to see you? Does she see you more than me? Well, he said, she's going to come with me on this trip. What? I scoffed. Why don't I come with you? I wondered, but I knew he'd make up some excuse about my needing to settle in before school starts, so I didn't bother asking. Nina leaned over to me and patted my arm. What's the big deal? I narrowed my eyes at him. You're not even going on this trip for work, are you? All that stuff about Mom was bullshit. This is just a romantic getaway, isn't it? Ugh, I bet you were bummed when I got shipped out here. God forbid I cockblock you, dude. Right during the honeymoon phase. Harper, that's not. I didn't let him finish his sentence. I stood up from my seat abruptly and walked away as fast as possible without causing a scene. I looked back at my dad to see if he had decided to follow me and crashed immediately into something with a sharp thud. No, not something. Someone. We were both knocked over and I fell onto a lean body with a smack. Ah, Harper. I pulled my face off her shoulder, buzzing from impact, and locked eyes with a raging Valentina. A blush spread like wildfire over my cheeks, and I worked to untangle my limbs from her as quickly as I could manage. A shattered champagne glass lay broke on the rug next to us, yellow liquid telling me she'd been holding a mimosa. I sucked in a breath. Oh my God, did you get cut? Are you hurt? Still on top of her, I moved my arms and examined them for cuts. My hands started searching other parts of her body to check for blood before she growled again. And with a strength I didn't know she was capable of, she shoved me off of her. Are you guys okay? Adon jogged over and reached out his hand. Valentina stuck her own hand out to take it, but Adon's grip landed in front of me. His sister's eyes narrowed at the both of us, and her anger went from rage to fuming. I flushed and took Adon's hand, if only to get this entire situation over with. Valentina pulled herself up, her lace dress falling back into place around her. She looked to Adon with betrayal in her eyes. When he started to speak, she turned and stormed off, leaving Adon with his hand still wrapped around mine. Do you want to get some air? He asked me, and I nodded as we stepped out onto the balcony. The brisk ocean air hit my face. Actually, I said, can you just take me home? Look, all I'm saying is you can't just ditch me. Sure, your dad's super hot, and if I tried, I could probably pretend he and I were on a date or something, but Nina, I said, not wanting to hear her finish that sentence. I leaned against my closet doorway as Nina hung dresses, sealed in garment bags on an empty rack. It had been hours since brunch, and Nina hadn't stopped talking about it. But, she continued, it's still not cool to abandon me like that, like ever. I don't know how things worked in Manhattan, but you can't just come and go as you please anymore. Maybe the guys you hung out with didn't give a shit if you ditched them, but here in Newport, I'm your bestie. Loud vehicles aren't cool at 11 p.m. A zipping sound filled my ears as Nina opened one of the garment bags, and with that roll comes all kinds of privileges, borrowing clothes, for example. She waved to a silky red dress that went to the floor in front of me. The cut was gorgeous, but the way it tightened at the chest and waist before flowing out dramatically was way too feminine for me. I groaned. Nina, I'm not wearing that. That's too much. Harper. No, I crossed my arms. You should wear it. It would look better on you anyway. Nina held the dress up to her body. You think you're curvier than me, and I think the dress needs that. You know, accentuate the hips and all that. She considered this, then moved to the other garment bag. If the red is a no for you, how about this one? That's fine, I nodded approvingly at the other option and tried not to think about what heels she decided to bring over. I'm gonna move my microphones really quick. Maybe a little closer. Little closer. Okay. There we go. That's fine, I nodded approvingly at the other option and tried not to think about what heels she decided to bring over. Wait, did I go back a little? She considered this, then moved to the other garment bag. If the red is a no for you, how about this one? That's fine, I nodded approvingly at the other option and tried not to think about what heels she decided to bring over. Fine, more like breathtaking, she muttered. She spun around. Speaking of breathtaking, you didn't tell me Adon was like in love with you. I rolled my eyes. No, he is not. Oh my god, the way he looked at you at brunch. Holy hell. And then that whole savior thing he did when you fell on top of his sister. Ick, I said at the same time as she said, so sweet. Oh, come on, she gushed. He's like the nicest, most genuine person around here. Just wait. You'll see the way he takes care of me, always putting her first and worrying about her. Imagine him as a boyfriend. He would totally do the same thing. Nina, I pointed to my chest. Gay. She sighed. I'm just saying, he's such a good guy. Too bad I don't want a good guy. Sounds to me like maybe you like him, I said, raising my eyebrow in her direction. She waved me away. Oh, please, I do not. Yet still she blushed. My mind wandered away from Adon and to the one thing I'd been trying not to think about. As for Valentina, is she? I left the question open, hoping Nina wouldn't make me say it. A bitch, Nina answered. Yes, and she's startlingly good at it. I'd stay away from her if you want to survive. She won't take kindly to Adon paying attention to you, especially since he rarely pays attention to any girl. Lovely. I pulled the the silver spoon from earlier out of my pocket and used my shirt to rub away any new stains. I examined it for a minute before walking over to the massive trunk pressed up against the end of the bed, then opened it. I placed the spoon inside with all of my other collectibles, old and new. No, I said, still facing the trunk. I mean, yeah, she's definitely a bitch, but like, is she? I thought for a second. Does Adon ever get jealous when she dates anyone? I shut the trunk and turned to watch Nina's expression. Her eyebrows were pinched in thought. Well, she doesn't really date anyone at Wellesley. Like anyone at all. Bingo. The rumors say she mostly dates college guys. My heart thudded. I don't know if Adon meets them first or what. I sucked in a breath. Yeah, right. I said before I could stop myself. From what you're telling me, Valentina doesn't date anyone. And when she does, no one has ever actually met them. Nina shrugged. I stared at her, waiting for her to pick up my meaning. When my implication finally clicked, her mouth dropped. You think she's gay? I nodded. She shook her head. No way, Harper. I know she's like swimsuit model, hot and everything, but that's just wishful thinking. I'm telling you, she's had boyfriends and stuff. They're just too cool to be our age. Can you imagine a girl like that dating the sloppy, immature adolescents at Wellesley? Forget it. Ask Adon about it. I bet he'll tell you. Before I could respond to that, she spoke again. Or actually, don't. That might be kind of awkward, being that he's all goo-goo eyes for you. I played with the shoelace of my boots. Can we talk about something else? Apparently my dad promised me we'd go pick her up at their house tonight. I think I'll get enough of Adon and Valentina then. Sorry for anyone who hates like swallowing sounds. Nina dropped her hands from her hips. Right. The cars are just on another level. Nina dropped her hands from her hips. Right, and the party starts at 9 p.m., so we should probably start getting ready. Oh, and since we're splitting up, don't forget we have the first order of the 6 meeting tonight. Yeah, at 10 p.m., I said. How could I forget? Where is it again? Let's look at the paper. Do you have it? I stuck my hand in my trunk and pulled out the scroll, unrolling it and flipping it to the side with the invitation. The Order of the 6 cordially invites you to the Cunninghams' annual Christmas party, where the challenge begins and the horizon is always clear. I read aloud. So, Nina smushed her shoulder up against mine and peered at the writing. So the first part of the challenge is to actually figure out the meeting place. The first meeting place. Sounds like we basically need to meet everyone where the horizon is always clear. Well, that's easy, I said. The Cunninghams are one of the houses on this cliff, right? I asked. She answered, a few down from me. Her green apple shampoo wafted into my nose, and I took a step away from her, lowering the scroll. Okay, well, that's the horizon. I pointed out towards my balcony, the ocean sparkling in the darkness. And my guess is it'll be clear around 10 p.m. when they expect us to meet them. I pulled out my phone and pulled up the weather app. Yep, it'll be totally clear at 10. So, like, we meet on the beach? Yeah, I said, tugging at a strand of hair. That's my guess. I shrugged, and if that doesn't work, we follow someone who looks like they're good at their goods. We follow someone who looks like they are sneaking off somewhere. She grinned. Oh, good one. The question is, I said, slowly unlacing my boots and dreading the pampering Nina would undoubtedly be putting me through in the next hour. What is the order going to have? What is the order going to have us do? Chapter 3. That was the end of chapter 2. Now we are going on to chapter as cute, if you know what I'm saying. I reached down to untwist the strap of my 4-inch heels, my fingers pulling aggressively at the buckle digging into my skin. My dad grabbed my elbow to steady me. "You look beautiful, honey. Stop fidgeting," he whispered. I dropped my hand and straightened. Heels simply weren't meant to be comfortable. I felt my dad pat my hand, which was tucked affectionately into the crook of his elbow. We stood at the entrance of the Vasquez estate, and with my father wearing a freshly pressed tux, we looked entirely too much like teenagers waiting for their prom dates. "Miss Vasquez, the Fontaines have arrived," the housekeeper spoke into the intercom. With that, I heard rather than saw Maisie arrive at the split staircase, her heels clicking as she walked. I wondered if they taught that at finishing school, how to command a room's attention with the appropriate footwear. "Maisie," my dad's voice echoed up the stairs as he took a step away from me. My hand was pulled from his arm with the movement, and I let it drop. Though I'd expected Miss Fontaine, to take the stairs slowly to show off the wildly formal train she was sporting on her Christmas red gown, she altogether flitted down the steps and into my father's open arms. I was grateful once again that I had gone with the emerald green dress Nina had brought as a backup instead of the red. I smoothed my hands over the satin fabric and wished I'd had something interesting to fidget with, for something to do besides watch the sickly sweet gushing happening to my left. Of course, there was no room to fit anything inside this dress, not with it fitted tightly from the waist up. I looked down at my chest. There was a tiny bit of room in there, but I doubted Nina would approve. My God, when was the last time I even wore a dress? More feet shuffled on the landing above. My heart rate quickened. Adon and Valentina descended the other staircase, this time at a speed fitting of someone in formal wear. As the twins often did, Adon's black tuxedo contrasted perfectly with Valentina's stunning champagne gown. I licked my lips suddenly dry and shifted a little in my spot. Adon kept his attention on Valentina, making sure she didn't trip on the hem of her dress. I quite literally had to refrain from mumbling, "Holy shit," because either the twins would think I was talking about Valentina, which I most certainly was, or even worse, they'd think I was talking about Adon. When they finally made it to the landing, they looked first to my dad, then to me. I offered up a small smile, not really sure which one of them to look at, and then looked down. I heard shuffling, only to see my dad and Macy approach the door beside me, ready to go. Finally, I thought. "Adon," Miss Vasquez said with meaning. I felt Adon's heat as he stepped in beside me, holding out his elbow. I glanced over my shoulder at Valentina, who was using both hands to lift the hem of her dress, her knuckles white, her eyes burned a hole into me. I hesitated. I wasn't a lady. Even if I was, I didn't need a man to take my arm and lead me to some fancy party. I didn't need a woman either, for that matter. I could just as easily make my way to the limo parked out front by myself. Of all things, I didn't need someone's mother telling them to take my hand wasn't one of them. And yet, Adon was nothing but kind to me. From what I knew of Adon, he wasn't offering his arm because someone told him to. He was simply a nice guy. As I lifted my hand slowly towards Adon, I felt a jab in my left shoulder. "Ouch," I said automatically as Valentina brushed past me, her head held high. She just couldn't be left behind, could she? Valentina, Adon growled, his voice low. I looked up at him. I'd never heard him use that kind of tone before, especially not with her. Valentina whirled around slightly, her dress moving with her. Don't, Adon, she replied, then quickly turned back around and found her way to the limo. Sorry about that, he said, looking sheepish. Don't worry about it, I said, taking his elbow. Tonight was going to be a long night. When we arrived at the Cunningham mansion, everything started clicking into place. Of course, the Cunninghams were the family to throw the social event of the season, as Adon had called it. They were by far the showiest family of the six. While their property was slightly larger than the others on this cliff, stretching at least 3 stories, they boasted expansive gardens on either side of the walkway entrance. For the holiday season, they sported 2 massive Christmas trees as the garden centerpieces, both decorated professionally and towering over the lot of us. But it was the building's entrance that truly loomed over us, 4 sturdy pillars supporting intricate moldings, only to be outdone by the fountain in front. The entire building was the color of stone, and if you looked closely, you were sure to discover another extraordinary piece of architecture. The inside was just as spectacular, with expensive decorations lining the halls and rooms without managing to be gaudy. Gold and silver glinted from every room, high-end jingle bells, garlands, and Christmas lights twinkling in the soft lighting. If I didn't know any better, I'd say there was at least 1 Christmas tree in each room of the house, but it was the ballroom, and that was the most impressive, with high ceilings and a vintage trim that reminded me of what I'd likely see inside a European castle. My first move was to check out the upscale cookie display lining one end of the room, since my dad was already pulling his new paramour out onto the dance floor. The gold walls behind them matched harmoniously with the ceiling mural of naked cherubs. I'm learning new words. They're not even uncommon words. Uh-oh. Sorry. My throat's getting real dry. Okay. A lively man in a suit threw his whole body into playing a shiny grand piano beside the dance floor, filling the room with an upbeat twist on Christmas classics. I picked up a perfectly decorated sugar cookie and scanned the room, which was absolutely buzzing with proper-looking people in evening wear. Many of the adults mingled around the vast space, whereas most of the kids around my age lounged at tables or in clusters. I started my descent slowly from one end of the table to the other, busying myself by picking up a variety of baked goods too fancy to ever be dreamed up by a public school bake sale. A massive white cake decorated with green frosted mistletoe sat untouched as the centerpiece to the table. I wondered for a moment if this was a buffet at all, but figured they wouldn't display the treats if they didn't want people to eat them. Before I could take a bite of the far too realistic gingerbread man I was holding, an old man stepped up beside me, plate in hand. It struck me as odd that a man like him would be serving himself. What with his Armani suit looking like it was tailor-made for him, and shoes that shined so bright they might as well replace a light bulb in the local lighthouse. Miss Fontaine, I presume. Miss Fontaine, I presume. The man looked down. It's an office joke. Jan Levinson, I presume. The man looked down at me through thick gray eyebrows that matched his hair. Though his wrinkles were apparent, they were soft and smooth, the way only a life of absolute luxury could afford. I nodded. Yes, Sir Harper. I held out my hand and let him take it, fully expecting the firm shake he gave. He picked up some baked goods from silver dishes in front of him, placed it on his plate, then spoke again. Ah, yes, I heard you would be joining us here in Newport. Lovely to have you back. It's been quite some time. I don't suppose you remember me. I was a friend of your grandfather. I opened my mouth and closed it. No, I didn't remember him, but I wasn't sure I should say that. Alistair Cunningham, he offered, releasing me from the awkwardness. That over there is my family. Have you met my grandchildren, Jack and Rebecca? I turned to see a tall brunette boy and a girl standing at the front of the room greeting guests. Whereas Rebecca stood out in her silver gown, Jack looked like just about every other guy here with his black tuxedo. Though both were clearly the result of fine breeding with their shiny hair and high cheekbones, they probably blended in with the rest of the student body at Wellesley Prep without the fancy wardrobe. I smiled. Not yet, though they do seem quite popular, I said, good-naturedly. He smiled back. Ah, yes, they certainly are. If you have a chance, do say hello to them, will you? I nodded. Alistair nodded back, but left his plate sitting on the table with nothing but a couple of too fancy sugar cookies on it. With the buffet line still as clear as ever, I continued moving down it once more, examining the spread and sampling anything that looked soft enough to bite into. I was sure not to rush, hoping to kill as much time as possible. As I finally hit the end of the table, Nina's high-pitched voice rang in my ear. Harper, where have you been? I've been looking all over for you. I swallowed the tart I'd been eating and angled away from the cookie display. Nina was standing in front of me with her hands on her hips. I was right. The red dress looked amazing on her, the princess seams accentuating her curves. She was just short enough that the hem dragged slightly on the ground, giving her a more regal appearance. No, you weren't, I scoffed. You've been gossiping with that boy over there for the last 45 minutes. I pointed a finger at a boyish-looking guy with short, cropped hair and soft features. I figured you'd come and find me when you were done. I shrugged and picked at my fruit tart. She batted a strand of curly brown hair from her eyes. Only you would prefer to be alone at a party, Harper. What were you guys talking about anyway? I asked, taking a sip from my champagne glass. You, Nina. Oh, relax. Jamie saw you walk in with Adon and V. He totally begged the situation. I didn't even have to tell him. Situation? Nina grabbed a glass of champagne off the moving tray. Oh, you know, Adon loving you, you being gay. Are we still on that subject? I asked, downing my glass and reaching for another. Nina ignored me and kept talking. Don't worry, token lesbian meet token gay. She waved in Jamie's direction. Ah, I said. Well, he has it worse off than me. In what way? He was raised here, I joked, and Nina elbowed me in the ribs. Very true. He agrees with you about V, by the way. He also picked up a vibe. A vibe. I next to him was saying, in a partially unbuttoned, crisp white shirt, was a tall guy with blonde hair that practically screamed Wellesley Prep. To be fair, most of the teenagers here did, barring the ones serving us, but this kid looked like the poster child for high school bullies. Enter Shane Gallagher, Jamie Russo's cousin, total brickwad. If you think V is bad, stay away from Shane. He's like the guy version, but amped up with white male privilege. Trust me, you don't want to touch that. What? Jamie always hangs around him or something like that. I don't know if it's because Jamie's mom makes him or something, but their families are super close. Either way, when you get Jamie, you usually get Shane. Gallagher and Russo sound familiar. Are those our neighbors? She answered. Yup, 2 of the original 6 families. Wow, I said. Small town, huh? You can say that again. She pulled her phone from her clutch and showed me the time. Oh my gosh, it's almost 10. We should head down to the beach. A clutch, I thought. Duh, why didn't I think to borrow one from Nina? I could fit all kinds of cool knickknacks in there, not to mention my dad wouldn't be stuck carrying my phone in his pocket like I was some 13-year-old kid. I scanned the room for my father before following Nina towards the back of the mansion. Was this whole secret society thing the right choice? It didn't really feel like something I'd do. I wanted to mention it to my dad, but he was still on the dance floor with Macy, looking gleeful as ever. This was my only night with my dad before he left for a bit, and I would barely get a chance to spend time with him. Well, if my dad wanted me to get to know the other kids here, this whole Order of the Sixth thing was probably a good idea after all. If he were too busy for me, I'd do what he wanted and meet some other teenagers. I held my dress up with one hand as my feet pressed into the cold sand, my heels dangling from the other. Nina and I walked silently down the trail to the beach, behind the Cunningham estate, joining a small crowd already gathered and somber. On the dimly lit beach, 100 years ago, the Order of the Six was born, a male voice called out confidently. He wore a black mask over his face, matching his suit. 6 others were standing silently behind him in similar masks, a mix of men and women in glamorous formal wear, covered almost completely by deep burgundy robes. The sight was chilling until I noticed a sliver of silver material peek out from the bottom of one of the robes. Rebecca Cunningham, I thought. That explains the Cunningham house as the first meeting location. The water glistened black behind the masked group. I trained my gaze on the speaker, commanding the attention of everyone with ease. 6 families, prestigious in nature, all with the same goal in mind: power. From power breeds opportunity. Cunningham, Gallagher, Vasquez, Fontaine, Russo, Muller. You know their names, you know our names. But as the order grew, so did the families, and the order began bringing in other members just as strong and capable as the original 6. Each of our most recent chapters boasts a mix of members selected from the original 6 families, as well as some from the other distinguished families in Newport. That is why you are all invited today, because we see potential in you, because you are someone. I fought the urge to roll my eyes at that. The chapter standing behind me is the previous generation of the older, now collegiates in their own right. 4 years ago, they stood on this beach just as you do tonight. This year, with their youngest member starting university, each member of their group can call themselves a scholar. To you, they are alumni. Their absence leaves room for a new chapter to grow in their place here in Newport. They have appointed me to lead the new generation subtle wave. Valentina looked ahead intently. I recognized Jamie and Shane and a few of the other douchebags that were sitting at their table. The rest of the group I didn't recognize. You may think you know who we are. You may believe what you've heard. Forget all of it. This year, we start a new order. Our order will not focus only on yacht parties and early admission to the most elite universities in the country. This year, we will become a part of something incredible. This year, we will change history. I leaned over to Nina and whispered, "Are you sure this isn't some sort of cult?" "Shh," she elbowed me. The 6 people in cloaks all moved at once, heading back up the beach pathway and in the direction of the party. In their absence, I noticed something in the water behind the leader. Floating deep in the ocean behind me are 10 dinghies. Each boat holds a scroll with the information for the time and meeting place of the next challenge. He paused, probably for dramatic effect. 12 of you will take on this challenge, but only 10 of you will advance on. If you do not succeed, you will be left behind. He paused. There can only be 6. He started walking toward the beach path, then stopped to address us. The only rule is this: you must return by the burning of the Yule log. Even if you retrieve a scroll, you will be hold on. We're getting to the good part, and of course my throat's trying to dry out. And I feel something in my shirt that's poking me. Okay. He started walking toward the beach path, then stopped to address us. The only rule is this: you must return by the burning of the Yule log. Even if you retrieve a scroll, you will be disqualified if you do not make it on time. Murmurs began amongst the group. He walked a few steps back toward the mansion, then looked over his shoulder. Do not get caught. Do not be obvious. And tell no one of this invitation. If your participation in the order is made known to outsiders, your regret will reach far beyond simple disqualification. His Oxfords crunched into the sand as he turned and headed off. I watched the back of his head as he slipped off his mask and cloak and disappeared into the night. I turned to Nina, shivering. I ran my hands up and down my arms to warm up. Okay, so now what? I asked her. Her face pinched as she looked out at the dark water. The others around us started spreading out across the beach and talking in hushed whispers. Before Nina could answer, we heard a splash and some whooping sounds coming from the ocean. Pretty much everyone turned to see Shane Gallagher and a couple of his buddies from the table earlier diving carelessly into the frigid water, their bare chests glistening in the moonlight. Jamie stood at the edge of the water, only his jacket off, looking timid as ever. Jamie, get your ass in the water, Shane shouted, stopping to look at him. The other guys paddled out quickly into the night, leaving Shane behind. Jamie hugged his thin figure and didn't respond. A guy at the other end of the beach stripped and started wading into the water. Wading into the water, but stopped mid-thigh. Even from where I was standing, I I could see him shaking. Nina must have noticed the same thing because her hand went to my arm and squeezed. I jumped a little. Her touch ice cold. I'm so sorry. I put my hand on her shoulders and rubbed her arms as we watched a couple wander off down the beach. I wonder where they're going, Nina said. They're going to try and find a kayak, Adon said. As he approached us, Valentina following close behind. They'll be lucky if they make it back in time. It's going to take them forever just to get it down here, Valentina said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. I noticed the ends blanketing her back and wondered if it kept her warm out here in the frostbitten night. Our heads all turned at the sound of Shane's voice again. I'll get your scroll for you this time, Russo, but mark my words, you owe me. With that, he turned and dove underwater. Nina shivered deeply. Oh God, you don't want to owe Shane a favor, she whispered. We should hide their clothes, I said to the group. They deserve it. Valentina snorted so loudly I couldn't help but look at her. Her lips were turned up and I couldn't even see her teeth. Butterflies rumbling in my stomach, and I urged myself to stay cool. Adon ran a hand through his hair. We can't. Why not? I asked. Shane's an asshole. He is, Adon admitted, but I think a bunch of wet, naked guys would tip the party off that something is going on down here. Valentina's smile dropped. Yeah, we can't risk exposure, she said. Nina pointed at Jamie, and we don't want them to blame Jamie. I rolled my eyes. Fine. What's our plan then? We can't stand here all night. We'll all freeze to death. Adon slipped his jacket off and started over to me like he was going to put it on my shoulders. With Nina still looking at Jamie, I shook my head silently at Adon. He paused, then placed his jacket over Nina's shoulders. Her hands went immediately to the soft fabric and pulled it tighter around her, giving Adon a grateful smile as she did so. I'll go in, Adon said as he started unbuttoning his shirt. My eyes lingered on his fingers. I'll grab scrolls for all of us, that way no one else has to go in. Valentina stepped in front of Adon, forcing eye contact. No way, Adon. We're not helping these losers. There can only be 6, remember? We're not making it easy for anyone else to get one of our spots. Adon dropped his hands and looked at Valentina, disappointed. No, Adon. They have to earn their spots. Plus, by the time you get 4 scrolls off the boats, you'll freeze to death. I looked up to the house, its bright lights spilling over the cliff above us. I spun around to face Nina. I'll go in for us. We're running out of time and I don't want to waste time arguing. Nina's eyes widened. But you're the worst swimmer here. You'll never keep up with Adon. You could drown, Harper. I know I said this was important to me, but swimming out there in the middle of December is a death sentence. I've been swimming in this ocean my whole life. I should do it. I gave her a look. Nina, you clearly can't tolerate the cold. It has to be me. Forget it, Adon, Valentina said beside me. She wasn't talking to Nina or me, but we looked over at her anyway. You may be a fast swimmer, but I know the water. I can get us out to the boats and back safely in the dark. Adon started, but Nina cut him off. I thought you didn't want to help us losers, Nina asked spitefully. Valentina clenched her jaw. Well, if Harper's cold, lifeless body washes up on the beach, I'm pretty sure we'll all get disqualified. I'm not taking that chance. She looked to Adon, her face softening. Speaking of, can you stand watch by the beach trail? If anyone from the party decides to take a leisurely stroll by the water, distract them. The last thing we need is a bunch of drunk parents finding us. He nodded and jogged up the beach towards his house. Nina, do you think you could manage to find a few towels and maybe figure out how we're going to dry our hair and stuff when we get back? The leader guy said we couldn't be obvious. I asked her. Nina nodded enthusiastically and was so obvious, and even if it wasn't, the Cunninghams are notorious bigwigs in this town. If there's a secret society, you can bet they're at the forefront of it. She must mean Jack Cunningham, Rebecca's brother, I thought. I followed close behind Valentina, but stopped abruptly when... oh no. I followed close behind Valentina, but stopped abruptly when her hands went behind her back and fiddled with her zipper, pulling it down a little. Where was I? Pulling it down a little. What are you doing? I asked her. Valentina laughed. You want to go swimming in an evening gown? It's too heavy. It'll drag us down. We'd never make it back in time. Plus, we can't show up at the party completely soaked. We have to get naked. She still wasn't looking at me as she spoke, and I was grateful. A lump had formed in my throat, and I worked hard on swallowing. Her fingers pulled at the zipper again, but it wouldn't budge. She looked over at me. You need to help me, she said, and I froze, then tried to recover. You could ask nicely, I retorted, folding my arms. She dropped her arms from her back, exasperated. Don't throw a fucking tantrum, I'm helping you. If I ask you to unzip me, you do it. She turned away and pulled her hair to her front, leaving her back exposed. The warmth from her body immediately hit me as I pressed my fingers to her back, grasping the zipper. My other hand steadied itself on her shoulder blade, pressing the fabric together and getting a good angle to pull. I yanked it a few times until the zipper released, then brought the metal down, her back slowly exposing more and more skin as I went. Goosebumps rose across her flesh and my heart rate picked up. When she was fully When she was fully unzipped, she turned to me expectantly. I gaped and realized she was going to help me with my dress. I turned. Valentina grabbed bunches of my dark blonde hair and laid it over my shoulder, her gentle touch surprising me. I clasped my hands together in front of me to stop the shaking, which was no longer the result of just the cold. She pulled the back of my dress open with the same care I'd taken on her, then went so far as to push one of my thick straps down my shoulder. I was absolutely buzzing at this point, but I managed to steal a glance back at her over my shoulder. Our eyes met and something jumped between us. I stood very still, like maybe if I moved, the moment would shatter. After a few seconds, her hands fell from my strap and she moved abruptly to the edge of the ocean. I quietly let out a breath I was holding and let my other strap fall. Valentina was in front of me, pulling her dress down and letting it land in a pool of silk around her ankles. She stood in front of me in nothing but a pair of cheeky nude underwear and a bare back. Screw cheeky underwear. Screw that stuff, okay? I can't wear those. I looked down at myself, eternally grateful. My dress allowed, and she's wearing cheeky underwear with a silk dress. Wow. Sorry, just a little side note. I let my own dress drop and refrained from holding my hands over my own black undergarments, attempting to emulate the same confidence Valentina was giving. Valentina took a breath and walked straight into the water, showing no signs of fear. I did the same, but gasped when the icy cold water bit my skin. Valentina was up to her waist when she turned back to me, still only ankle deep. I'm not waiting for you. If you can't keep up, that's your issue. She turned away and waded deeper into the blackness. The view of her bare skin had me chasing after her more so than the risk I'd be taking if I fell behind. We swam quietly through the water, her pace always much quicker than mine. I did notice her slow down a few times, though she'd never glanced back at me, and I wondered she needed a break or if she was waiting for me to catch up. At one point, I turned around to see how far from shore we'd gotten and immediately regretted it. The mansion was starting to look like a dollhouse with how far out we'd swum. I was certain my lips were turning blue, and even Valentina was now audibly shaking, her breaths coming out ragged. There, she said with some effort, her shoulders moving up and down in the water. I followed her gaze to a row of shiny white dinghies tied to buoys bobbing in the water. The entire setting was wildly creepy, the darkness swallowing much of the scene up whole. You grab your two and I'll grab mine, she instructed and swam a couple more paces to the boats in front of us. There was no one else here, so either they'd retrieved their scrolls already and headed back, bailed before they made it, or simply decided not to try. I pushed my arms out, propelling me forward, the action exhausting me. I hovered by the closest dinghy and caught my breath, wanting to get this over with, but knowing I was losing energy by the second. A splash sounded as Valentina pulled herself out of the water and into the boat. I kept my eyes trained on her as she tried wiping her hands off before picking up one of the scrolls. She pulled it up and read its contents with great interest. As she stood up again, I really tried not to look at her naked body. The moon lit up her features, and despite the glacial temperatures, I felt a spike of warmth run through my torso. She tossed the scroll into the other boat and crouched, jumping from one rocking boat to the other. She landed with a thud. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice tight. "Get your scrolls," she said forcefully, ignoring my question. I did as I was told, mimicking Valentina's route until I held both scrolls from my own dinghies in my hands. I peered into the water, wondering if Valentina had left without me, considering the time I'd wasted. Yet there she was, scroll lifted above her head to stay dry, the rest of her floating expertly in the ocean. I looked down at my scrolls and stuck them in my left hand, holding them up and praying I wouldn't accidentally drop them. If the ink smudged, they'd likely be unreadable, which I suddenly realized was probably part of the whole challenge. In a clumsy move, I managed to keep my right hand on the edge of the boat while jumping into the water. My thigh smacked the boat's rough surface on the way down, and I winced. That was going to bruise. With our hands still holding the scrolls above our heads, we waded as fast as we could back to shore, our teeth chattering and losing feeling in our limbs. It took a while since we couldn't use our arms to swim, but we were almost to shore to my great relief. "Thank God," I mumbled, my entire body burning with pain, when our toes finally touched the ground. Valentina turned and smiled. Who knew skinny dipping in frigid temperatures was what it took to get Valentina to show some joy? I thought I smiled back, feeling surprisingly just as justified to have almost completed our very first challenge. I liked the rush it gave me, and especially liked how close I was swimming to Valentina. She looked up at her scrolls and moved them both into one hand, freeing up the other arm and letting it drop. I moved to do the same, bringing my hands in front of my face and pushing both scrolls into my left palm, eager to feel the blood rushing to my right arm again. Before I could bring the scrolls back up and away from the threatening water, I felt Valentina's grip hard on my wrist, and soon it was plunging the scrolls deep underwater. Oh no. I felt the drowning paper slip from my fingers and screamed no as Valentina turned from me and moved quickly back to the beach. I dragged my hands around in the water and found only one of the scrolls. Though I pulled it out as quickly as I could, it was already sopping wet and ruined. "You bitch," I yelled out, not caring who heard me. I peeled the scroll open carefully as I propelled myself out of the water, but it was too late. The only was readable at this point was what looked like a string of numbers inked into the bottom right corner. Before I could look too closely, I stumbled out of the water and into the towel Nina was holding open for me. I pulled the soft fabric as snugly around me as I could, my head spinning in various directions looking for Valentina. She's already halfway back to the mansion, Nina said, her tone defeated. I saw the whole thing. We're out, aren't we? Still wearing a Don's jacket, Nina helped me rub the towel quickly across my body and pull on my dress. I squeezed out my hair and followed Nina to a powder room on the second floor of the Cunningham estate. She had a hairdryer and some red lipstick waiting for me. I'm surprised Shane didn't try and steal all the other scrolls to screw the rest of us over, Nina said loudly over the hairdryer she was using on my hair. It was too cold. He would probably have frozen to death before he managed to grab them all. I said. Nina's fingers pulled slightly as they dipped into my tangled mess, spreading out strands as the heat blasted onto it. True, she said, plus he's too cocky. He doesn't think anyone is as smart as him. Probably didn't think anyone else could do it. I thought about Valentina's death grip on my hand and the defiant look she'd given me before sabotaging my one chance at the order. I know one person who's smarter than him, I grumbled. Not that it matters, but we have about 3 minutes until the burning of the... Excuse me. Not that it matters, but we have about 3 minutes until the burning of the Yule log, Nina said, looking at her phone. It's fine, I answered, smearing the lipstick over my lips and taking a step back to look in the mirror. I looked entirely different from the girl who'd walked into the party, the one with sleek, long hair and natural-looking makeup. My hair now had a beach wave, which was saved by the glamour of the red lip. Unbelievable, Nina complained, the hairdryer dangling from her hand. You take a dip in the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of the night and still come out of it looking better than me. Maybe I should have gone in. Shut up, Nina, you know that's not true. I should be thanking you for pulling me together after that whole ordeal, I said. I watched Nina hold up the single scroll I'd recovered and inspected. Now mostly dry from the heat of the hairdryer. I leaned in but saw nothing but smudges. Valentina's such a bitch, I said under my breath. She's going to pay for this. Nina pulled my signature move and rolled her eyes. Retract the claws, kitty. We'll figure something out. She clutched the scroll covertly in her hand as we descended the staircase back to the party. We have to, I whispered, as we made it just in time for the Yule log burning. And that is the end of chapter 3. It was getting a little spicy there. Thank you guys for who stayed and hung out with me. I'm sorry for the dry throat issues. Whispering reading out loud for an hour is kind of hard to do.